ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi, Jules and Jez here. Jules, you've been down a bit of a rabbit hole recently.
More of a shallow pond filled with flower petals. Meghan Markle's new Netflix show. Not my jam, but it is hers. Good on her.
You can catch our chat on Not Stupid. Find us on the ABC Listen app.
The Prime Minister has agreed insurance companies are ripping us off, and there are many Australians who would have experienced that firsthand. So, how will the companies respond as tens of thousands of claims are lodged after flooding in the wake of ex-Cyclone Alfred? Today, National Consumer Affairs reporter Michael Atkin on why premiums keep rising and what can be done to level the playing field. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Michael, you're a Brisbane resident and you've been out and about reporting in the wake of ex-Cyclone Alfred. And, you know, while it wasn't as bad as it could have been, it's been a very rough time for a lot of people up there, hasn't it?
It has been. It has been scary, I think, for everybody in the city in Brisbane, but also up and down the East Coast. You know, we're already seeing tens of thousands of insurance claims for damaged homes, for wrecked cars, for businesses that have been destroyed or heavily affected. And the industry says that number is going to keep getting bigger.
And the thing is, Michael, there is a sense that it might not be a smooth ride, right, with the insurance companies. And no wonder, because after the 2022 floods, those devastating floods, they moved really slowly on claims.
That's been the criticism. They were heavily criticised. There was a Labor-led parliamentary inquiry into what happened after that, and it found that many of the insurance cases were badly mishandled by insurers with massive delays, and that affected everything from the issue getting resolved to people getting back into their homes and many issues in between. One of the most serious accusations was some insurers lowballing victims with inadequate cash settlements so that when they took those cash settlements and went to fix their home, in fact, the cost was much higher. But also using clauses in contracts to deny some claims unreasonably. So the industry says it was an unprecedented event. They were flat out. It was hard to cope, and they've promised to do better next time. But politicians are warning them right now, we're watching you. You better do better.
Yeah, they sure are. Even the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he was speaking on Channel 7 and he agreed with the assertion that Aussies are being ripped off by insurance companies.
We've just had David Koch say that insurance companies have plenty of money. They are ripping us off. They have put their premiums up, double inflation. What do you say to that?
I say that Koch is right, and we will certainly hold the insurance companies to account. This is
the situation politicians face now, where there's red hot anger in the community about how premium prices have been increasing, and you know, people who have had those negative experiences with insurers after claiming are concerned that it might happen again.
And we all know, as holders of insurance, that premiums have been going up. How much are premiums increasing, for instance, since the 2022 floods?
Well, the cost of insurance has been skyrocketing. According to the ABS, the annual cost of insurance rose by 11% in the year to December. But before that, it's been as high as 16%. And I've spoken to people who have copped increases as big as 100% year on year, even though they reckon they don't live in risky areas. But the industry says that this is what's to be expected. It rejects these claims of price gouging. It says rising premiums have just been driven by these more severe weather events that we're seeing, worsened by climate change, and the increased costs for insurers, particularly around the cost of rebuilding a home.
All right, and it's really tough, of course, those rising premiums for people who have insurance, Michael. But during your reporting, you've actually come across people who are uninsured. They cannot afford the insurance. Tell me about Matthew O'Halloran.
Yeah, so this week I met Matthew as the river was rising in his community of Ipswich and some of the neighbouring creeks.
We've got the old marking on the back of the veranda where we marked it down the last flooding. But yeah, it's been going up very quickly and just rising and that.
There was still a major flood watch in place for the river, and he was nervous. He'd flooded before, and when I talked to him about what he was doing, he'd made all these preparations around his property.
We've just been putting everything up high, and not much you can really do because you don't know how high it goes here. Because out 2011, it went over the roof.
The thing is, he said to me, I don't have insurance. He couldn't afford it. And he was terrified that he might lose everything and that it might have a monumental financial impact on himself and his family. And do you guys have insurance?
No. And that's not a good thing.
Thankfully, that didn't happen, but the risk to his community, might happen again in future events. And that was part of what we were talking about.
And the thing is, Matthew is not on his own because more and more people are uninsured altogether. They can no longer afford it.
Yeah, new research from the Australia Institute shows now that 1 in 5 Australian households say their home is uninsured or underinsured. So underinsurance is another chronic problem where, people may have cover, but if the worst comes to worst and your home is destroyed, then you'll be left massively out of pocket. And that is a serious situation that can also take people years to recover from. The research found that if the average middle Australian was not insured and they lost their home in a flood, fire or other natural disaster, they'd lose more than 74% of their overall wealth. So catastrophic impact on their future.
Well, Michael, putting natural disasters to one side, I want to talk to you about other reasons that premiums are soaring. You've discovered even our age is a factor in this.
This will be surprising to most people. I decided I wanted to do some research to test what was happening, and we found that age was a significant variable in how much you're paying for home insurance. Age is clearly shown by statistics to be a factor. If you're a young male driver, statistically you're more risky than somebody who's more experienced. But, we decided to test this for home insurance. So what I found is that across the board, older Australians are paying less for home insurance. And overall, we found that 25 to 30-year-olds were priced higher than any other ages by Budget Direct, NRMA and QBE. The younger age group are paying between $150 and $490 extra each year, depending on the insurer, when compared to a 75-year-old's premium. And what was really interesting, I think, is that it was inconsistent across insurers. So some insurers were pricing a 40 or 45-year-old the hardest compared to others who were pricing a 25-year-old the hardest. And so the insurers, they say it's all about the data, but it's being done inconsistently across the industry. They've defended the practice to me. They say it's based on their data about claims over time and that they can clearly show that older people are less risky, often because they're at home more often. But because the data is deemed commercial in confidence, nobody's had a look at the data apart from the insurers, so it's not possible to verify.
All right. You've also uncovered, Michael, that some of us are being heavily taxed on our insurance policy. So what's going on there?
Yes, particularly for people who live in New South Wales and Tasmania. So they're paying 3 taxes on home insurance. stamp duty or insurance duty, emergency services levies, and the GST. So for some people, that might mean a premium that's higher by more than a quarter. So that can seriously push up the premium for somebody, particularly if they live in a high risk area. So there's a big variation in how much tax people pay depending on where they live.
And the thing is, Michael, while our premiums keep going up, of course, the insurance companies are making more and more money, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the key thing to remember. This is a commercial sector. The imperative driving principle is profit, and the industry made almost $970 million in profit last year on home insurance policies, according to the latest figures from the regulator APRA. But that's a dramatic turnaround. It is a volatile sector. There were heavy losses in 2022 after the floods. And so that's why, given the profit after the last year, consumer groups and former ACCC boss Alan Fels question whether there have been examples of price gouging, maybe not across the board, but there are examples, they think, of excessive looking prices that they don't think can be reasonably explained, which the industry rejects. But again, nobody's had a look at this.
So, Michael, insurance is beyond reach now for many Australians living in high-risk areas, and premiums are rising for everyone else too. There are a lot of ideas out there, I think, to make it a more level playing field. But is there anything that can actually be done to make it better?
Some experts make the argument for government to step in here and provide insurance to the insurers for extreme weather events. So they're talking about something that exists already for cyclones called a reinsurance pool. And how it works basically is private insurers pass on their risk to a state-owned pool, and that means that premiums generally are lower is the goal. It mitigates their losses in big events somewhat, and therefore it should result in prices coming down for people. But of course, that means that, taxpayers have to stump up some of the bill. From industry's perspective, they've been highly critical of this. They don't love this idea at all. They say it interferes in the free market, and they also say it gives people a false sense of security, and experts admit that they have a point here, that it sends the wrong price signal to people in risky areas and could facilitate even rebuilding in high-risk areas for people who suffer repeated losses. And the worst case scenario the industry points to is what's happened recently in California with the wildfires, where they've got an insurer of last resort for people who can't find a private insurer to cover them. Many of those high-risk homes burned down in that massive fire event, and now the insurer of last resort needs a bailout to cover these massive losses. So they say, have a look at that. We don't want to do that. But experts say there are better examples around the world that might be more applicable.
So, Michael, in the meantime, it's up to us, I suppose, as individuals. So what can we do to make sure we're getting a good deal and that the insurance companies will pay out when a disaster happens?
I think what's really important is that people actually make sure they've got the right level of cover, because people get caught off guard with this all the time. They think they're insured for something, but they're not, or they're underinsured. Sometimes people think they're covered for flood, but it's actually excluded. So those are the things that people actually need to take the painstaking time to make sure they've got it right. Make sure you shop around. It's also time consuming, but in most cases, you'll be saving plenty of money. And the expert advice, and this is what insurers say as well, is you need to make sure that you do what you can regularly around your house, like proper maintenance to your roof, gutters, and other important areas to make sure that if things do go wrong, that you've kept it up to scratch. And that can be really important if things do turn really badly and you make a claim, because insurers often say inadequate maintenance means that you can't get a payout or your payout's reduced. So you need to keep your evidence that you've done that, not only just do it, and then, hopefully those things will be standing you in good stead.
Michael Atkin is the ABC's National Consumer Affairs reporter. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Adair Shepherd. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.